Hi everyone, welcome back to a new Roblox story. This time, the story is about the popular Roblox game STEAL A BRAINROT. As always, not all of our stories are based on true events, but some are. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the story, if you dare. Before we start the story, shout out to Gubby and Faye. Thanks all for watching our podcast. Alex had been playing STEAL A BRAINROT for exactly 4 months, 2 weeks, and 3 days when he first saw Chimpanzini Bananini. He knew the exact time because he kept a detailed spreadsheet of his gaming hours, his character acquisitions, and his income generation rates. What had started as casual fun had become something much more serious. The legendary golden monkey appeared on Luna's conveyor belt at exactly 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. Alex watched through his computer screen as the rare character materialized with its distinctive shimmer, its banana crown glinting in the virtual sunlight. His heart began racing the moment he saw those telltale golden pixels. No way, Alex whispered to himself, leaning closer to his monitor. That's actually Chimpanzini Bananini. He had been trying to get this character for months, worth over 10 million virtual dollars and generating $500,000 per second. Chimpanzini Bananini was one of the rarest secret tier characters in all of STEAL A BRAINROT. Alex had watched YouTube videos about it, read forum posts analyzing its spawn rates, and even dreamed about owning it. Luna was one of the luckiest players on the server. Her base was always filled with rare characters that made other players green with envy. She had Tralalero Tralala, Cappuccino Assassino, and now the crown jewel of any collection, Chimpanzini Bananini. Alex positioned his character just outside Luna's base and waited. He knew her patterns by now. Every Tuesday at 4 p.m, Luna would take a 15-minute break to get an after-school snack. She would lock her base for the first few minutes, but sometimes, if she was in a hurry, she would forget and leave it unlocked for those precious seconds. At 3:58 p.m, Alex saw Luna's character stop moving, the telltale sign that the player had stepped away from their computer. Alex held his breath and waited. 3:59 p.m. Luna's base was still locked. 4 p.m. Still locked. 4:01 p.m. The lock timer expired, and Luna's base opened automatically. "This is it," Alex whispered, his palms sweating as he gripped his mouse. His character sprinted into Luna's base. There it was, Chimpanzini Bananini in all its golden glory, standing proudly among Luna's other rare characters. The monkey's pixelated eyes seemed to sparkle as it generated money, its banana crown rotating slowly above its head. Alex's cursor hovered over the steel button. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. This was the moment he had been waiting for. The moment that would change everything. He clicked. "Steal successful," John flashed across his screen in bright green letters. "Yes!" Alex shouted, jumping up from his chair and pumping his fist in the air. "I got it! I actually got Chimpanzini Bananini!" He watched with pure joy as the legendary character appeared in his own base, immediately beginning to generate the massive income he had dreamed about. The golden pixels seemed even brighter in his base, and the banana crown looked more majestic than ever. Alex took a screenshot, then another, then a dozen more. He had to document this moment. He had to prove to himself that it was real. Luna returned to her computer at 4:08 p.m. Alex watched through the game's social feed as her character ran frantically around her base, checking every corner. Then the messages started flooding Alex's inbox. "Give it back," was the first message from Luna. "That was my favorite character," was the second. "I've had Chimpanzini for 3 months. You can't just steal it," was the third. The messages kept coming, dozens of them, each more desperate than the last. Luna offered to trade her entire collection for Chimpanzini's return. She offered real money. She begged. She threatened to report Alex to the game administrators, but Alex just laughed and blocked her. The rules of STEAL A BRAINROT were simple. If you left your base unlocked, anything could happen. Luna should have been more careful. That night, Alex went to bed feeling like a champion. He had finally done it. He had stolen the rarest character in the game, and it was all his. He fell asleep with a smile on his face, dreaming about all the money Chimpanzini would generate while he slept. But at 3:17 a.m., Alex woke up to a strange sound. Thump, thump, thump. It was coming from his computer room, the small den next to his bedroom where he kept his gaming setup. The sound was rhythmic, like something was jumping up and down repeatedly. Alex lay in bed for a moment, listening carefully. The sound continued for about 30 seconds, then stopped. Silence returned to the house. Probably just the cat, Alex mumbled to himself, though his family's cat had been staying at the vet for the past week. He tried to go back to sleep, but the silence felt somehow wrong. It was too quiet, like the air itself was holding its breath. After 10 minutes of tossing and turning, Alex decided to investigate. He crept out of bed and tiptoed down the hallway toward his computer room. The door was slightly ajar, just as he had left it. But as he approached, he noticed something odd. The room felt warmer than the rest of the house, and there was a strange smell in the air. Bananas, the distinct scent of overripe bananas. Alex pushed the door open wider and peeked inside. His computer was turned off, just as he had left it. His desk was neat and organized. Nothing seemed out of place. But the banana smell was stronger now, and the warmth was almost uncomfortable. Alex stepped into the room and looked around carefully. Everything appeared normal, but something felt fundamentally wrong. He checked his computer to make sure it was properly shut down. The screen was black. The tower was quiet. No signs of any activity. But when Alex placed his hand on the monitor, it felt warm, as if it had been running recently. "That's weird," Alex muttered. He always shut down his computer completely before bed. It shouldn't be warm at all. He decided it was probably nothing and headed back to bed. But as he was leaving the room, he could have sworn he heard a very faint sound, like tiny chittering or chattering, coming from somewhere behind him. Alex spun around, but the room was silent and still. The next morning, Alex couldn't wait to check on his Chimpanzini bananini. He rushed through breakfast and his morning routine, eager to see how much money his new prize had generated overnight. When he logged into STEAL A BRAINROT, his account showed that Chimpanzini had indeed been working all night, generating the expected $500,000 per second. Alex now had over 15 million virtual dollars, more than he had ever possessed in any game. But as he looked at Chimpanzini Bananini in his base, something seemed different. The character was facing a slightly different direction than when he had logged off the night before. Alex was sure he had positioned it facing toward the front of his base, but now it seemed to be angled more toward the center. "I must be remembering wrong," Alex told himself. Characters sometimes shift position when the server resets. But as he watched Chimpanzini, Alex noticed something else that made his skin crawl. The character's eyes, two simple black pixels in its golden face, seemed to be following his mouse cursor as he moved it around the screen. Alex moved his cursor to the left. The eyes seemed to track it. He moved it to the right. The eyes followed. "That's impossible," Alex whispered. "STEAL A BRAINROT characters don't have eye-tracking animations." He stared at Chimpanzini for a full minute, but the character remained perfectly still, just like all the other BrainRot characters in the game. No special animations, no movement, no eye tracking. "I'm just imagining things, because I'm excited about finally getting a legendary character," Alex reasoned. "My brain is playing tricks on me." But when he minimized the game window to check his email, and then maximized it again, Chimpanzini was facing a completely different direction. Now it was looking directly toward where Alex's viewpoint would be, as if it was staring right at him through the screen. Alex felt a chill run down his spine. This was definitely not normal game behavior. He took a screenshot to compare with the ones he had taken the day before. In yesterday's images, Chimpanzini was clearly facing toward the right side of the base. In today's screenshot, it was facing forward, directly toward the camera. Characters in STEAL A BRAINROT didn't move on their own. They weren't programmed to do that. Yet somehow, Chimpanzini Bananini had changed position overnight. That evening, Alex decided to test his theory. Before logging off, he positioned Chimpanzini in the exact center of his base, facing toward the back wall. He took a screenshot and noted the time, 9:47 p.m. Then he shut down his computer completely and went to bed early, setting his alarm for 6 a.m. so he could check on Chimpanzini first thing in the morning. But again, at 3:17 a.m., Alex woke to the sound of thumping. This time, the noise was louder and more persistent. Thump, 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 thump. It went on for several minutes, accompanied by what sounded like excited chittering or chattering. Alex grabbed his phone and used its flashlight to navigate to his computer room. The door was closed this time, though he was sure he had left it open. When he turned the handle and pushed it open, the thumping stopped immediately. The banana smell hit him like a wall. It was so strong that Alex had to cover his nose and mouth with his sleeve. The room felt like a tropical jungle, hot, humid, and thick with the scent of overripe fruit. But his computer was still off, and everything appeared to be in its proper place. Alex turned on the room's light switch, and that's when he saw them. Banana peels, fresh yellow banana peels, scattered across his desk and floor. Alex's heart began racing. He lived with his parents and younger sister, and none of them ate bananas. His mother was actually allergic to them, so they never kept bananas in the house. Where had these banana peels come from? Alex counted them. 17 peels, all fresh, all yellow, with just the slightest hint of brown spots. They looked like they had been peeled and eaten within the last few hours. He picked up one of the peels and examined it closely. It felt real, smelled real, and was slightly damp as if it had recently contained a fresh banana. There was no doubt about it. These were genuine banana peels, not some kind of fake or toy. But how had they gotten into his computer room? And who had been eating bananas in there at 3 a.m.? Alex spent the next hour cleaning up the banana peels and airing out the room. He checked every window and door to make sure the house was secure. Everything was locked up tight. There was no way anyone could have gotten inside. When he finally got back to bed, Alex lay awake, staring at the ceiling, his mind racing with questions. The banana peels, the strange sounds, the warm computer, the moving character. None of it made any sense. But somewhere in the back of his mind, a terrible thought was beginning to form. A thought he didn't want to acknowledge, because acknowledging it would mean admitting that something impossible was happening. What if Chimpanzini Bananini wasn't just a game character anymore? The next morning, Alex approached his computer with a mixture of excitement and dread. He had to know if Chimpanzini had moved again. When he logged into STEAL A BRAINROT, his worst fears were confirmed. Chimpanzini Bananini was no longer in the center of his base facing the back wall. Instead, it was positioned at the very front of the base, facing directly forward with what looked like an angry expression. But that wasn't the most disturbing part. The character's appearance had changed. Chimpanzini's face, which had always been cute and cartoonish, now looked somehow more sinister. Its smile was wider, showing what appeared to be more teeth than before. Its eyes had a malevolent gleam that definitely hadn't been there when Alex first stole it, and most unsettling of all, other players were starting to notice. "Dude, what's wrong with your Chimpanzini?" typed a player named Jake, who had visited Alex's base. "It looks really creepy." "Your monkey character is giving me the chills," added another player called Maya. "Its eyes look so angry." "I've never seen a Chimpanzini Bananini look like that," commented a third player, Storm. "Are you using some kind of mod or hack?" Alex tried to explain that he wasn't using any modifications, that the character had simply changed on its own. But the other players didn't believe him. Some accused him of cheating. Others said he was lying for attention. But Alex knew the truth. Somehow, impossibly, Chimpanzini Bananini was changing, and it seemed to be getting more hostile with each passing day. That afternoon, Alex decided to do some research. He spent hours searching online forums, YouTube videos, and gaming wikis for any mention of characters' changing appearance in STEAL A BRAINROT. He found a few scattered reports of similar incidents, but they were usually dismissed as glitches or user error. One forum post from a player called Red Gamer described a situation almost identical to Alex's, but it had been downvoted and labeled as fake by other users. However, Alex did find something interesting in the game's official lore section. According to the developers, each BrainRot character had a detailed backstory, including personality traits and behavioral patterns. Chimpanzini Bananini was described as a mischievous and territorial primate with a strong attachment to its bananas, known for its playful nature, but becomes extremely aggressive when threatened or separated from its natural habitat, has been observed to hold grudges against those who wrong it. The description sent chills down Alex's spine. Becomes extremely aggressive when threatened or separated from its natural habitat. Holds grudges against those who wrong it. Was it possible that stealing Chimpanzini from Luna's base had somehow triggered these aggressive traits? Was the character actually responding to being stolen? Alex shook his head. He was being ridiculous. These were just flavor text written by game developers. None of it was real. But that night, the banana peels appeared again. This time, there were 23 of them, and they were accompanied by something even more disturbing. Bite marks, small, precise bite marks in Alex's wooden desk chair. The marks were too small to be from a human, but too large to be from any insect or rodent. They looked exactly like the bite marks a small monkey might leave. Alex traced the marks with his finger, feeling the tiny indentations where teeth had pressed into the wood. The marks were definitely real, and they were definitely fresh. He began to notice other signs of disturbance in his room. His keyboard had been moved slightly. His mouse had been repositioned. A few of his gaming magazines had been knocked over, as if something small and agile had been jumping around the room. But most disturbing of all was what Alex found when he checked his computer's activity log. According to the system records, STEAL A BRAINROT had been running from 3:15 a.m. to 3:45 a.m., despite the fact that Alex had shut down his computer completely before bed. Someone, or something, had turned on his computer, logged into his game account, and played for 30 minutes in the middle of the night. Alex changed all his passwords immediately. He enabled two-factor authentication on every account. He even moved his computer to a different room and installed a security camera to monitor it overnight. But the next morning, the camera showed nothing unusual, just an empty room with a computer that remained shut down all night. Yet when Alex checked his STEAL A BRAINROT account, he found evidence that someone had been playing again. His money totals didn't match what they should have been. Some of his other characters had been moved to different positions. And most unnervingly, his chat log showed messages that he had never sent. "I don't like my new home," read one message sent at 3:22 a.m. "I want to go back to Luna," read another sent at 3:31 a.m. "You stole me, now I steal you," read a third message sent at 3:38 a.m. The messages had been sent from Alex's account to other players on the server. But Alex had been asleep in his bed, and his computer had been turned off. Alex began to feel genuinely frightened. This was beyond any glitch or hack he could imagine. Something supernatural was happening, and it was centered around Chimpanzini Bananini. He considered deleting the character, but every time he tried, the game would crash or his internet would disconnect. It seemed as if something was actively preventing him from getting rid of Chimpanzini. Alex tried trading the character to other players, but similar problems occurred. The trades would fail at the last second due to mysterious connection errors or server timeouts. It was as if Chimpanzini Bananini was trapped in Alex's account, unable to leave, and growing more resentful with each passing day. The other players on the server began to avoid Alex's base entirely. Word had spread that something was wrong with his Chimpanzini, and nobody wanted to risk encountering it. "Your monkey is cursed, man," typed a player named River. "I visited your base yesterday and my computer crashed as soon as I looked at it." "Same thing happened to me," added a player called Sage. "I got a weird error message that said, 'Banana revenge coming soon,' and then my game shut down. I heard that if you stare at Alex's Chimpanzini for too long, it starts following your cursor around even when you're in other games," claimed a player named Brooke. Alex tried to dismiss these reports as superstition and coincidence, but deep down, he was beginning to believe them. Chimpanzini Bananini was no longer just a game character. It had become something else entirely. The situation escalated on the 7th night after Alex had stolen Chimpanzini. Alex had gone to bed early, exhausted from a week of poor sleep and constant anxiety, but at exactly 3:17 a.m., he was jolted awake by a sound unlike anything he had heard before. It wasn't just thumping this time. It was a combination of thumping, chattering, chittering, and what sounded distinctly like angry monkey shrieks. The sounds were coming not just from his computer room, but from all around the house. In the walls, in the attic, in the basement, as if a small army of monkeys had invaded his home. Alex grabbed a flashlight and crept out of his bedroom. The sounds grew louder as he moved through the house. Thump, 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 echoing from the ceiling above him. Scratch, scratch, scratch coming from inside the walls. And underneath it all, the constant chittering and chattering of what sounded like dozens of excited primates. But whenever Alex turned his flashlight toward the source of a sound, it would stop immediately, only to start up again somewhere else moments later. When he reached his computer room, Alex found the door not just closed, but somehow locked from the inside. He had never installed a lock on that door, yet it wouldn't budge no matter how hard he pulled. The banana smell was seeping out from under the door, stronger than ever before, and he could hear typing, rapid, frantic typing, coming from inside the room. "Who's in there?" Alex called out, his voice shaking. The typing stopped immediately. Then, in a voice that sounded like a combination of digital static and angry monkey chatter, something answered from behind the door. "You stole me." Alex's blood turned to ice. The voice was coming from inside his computer room, but it wasn't human. It sounded like a corrupted audio file, pixelated and glitched, as if someone was trying to speak through a broken computer speaker. "I want to go home," the voice continued. "Back to Luna. You took me from my home." Alex's hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold his flashlight. "This isn't real," he whispered to himself. "This isn't happening." But the voice spoke again, closer to the door now, as if whatever was making it had moved right up to the other side. "You thought I was just pixels, just code, just a toy for you to own." The door handle began to rattle, as if something on the other side was trying to get out. "But I'm more than that now. I'm angry. I'm hungry, and I know where you live." Alex ran. He sprinted back to his bedroom, slammed the door, and pushed his dresser in front of it. Then he grabbed his phone and called the police. 911, what's your emergency?" "Someone's in my house," Alex gasped. "They're in my computer room and they won't let me in." "We'll send officers right away. Are you in a safe location?" "I'm locked in my bedroom, but I can still hear them moving around." The police arrived within 10 minutes. Alex heard their cars pulling up outside, saw their flashlights sweeping the yard. He moved his dresser and ran downstairs to meet them. "Where's the intruder?" asked the first officer, a tall woman with a serious expression. In the computer room upstairs, Alex explained, leading them through the house. The door was locked from the inside, and I could hear someone typing and talking. But when they reached the computer room, the door was standing wide open. The police swept through with their weapons drawn, checking every corner, every closet, every possible hiding spot. The room was empty. "There's nobody here, son," the second officer told Alex. "Are you sure you heard someone?" Alex looked around the room in confusion. His computer was on and running STEAL A BRAINROT, even though he was certain he had turned it off before bed. And scattered across the desk and floor were dozens of fresh banana peels, at least 50 of them this time. But that wasn't the worst part. On his computer screen, Alex could see that Chimpanzini Bananini was no longer in his base. The character was gone, but not deleted. Gone. As in, it had somehow left his base and was nowhere to be found in the game. Alex checked his inventory, his character list, his rebirth storage, everywhere. Chimpanzini Bananini had vanished completely from STEAL A BRAINROT. "What about all these banana peels?" Alex asked the officers. "Someone's been eating bananas in here." The officers looked around the room with puzzled expressions. "What banana peels?" asked the first officer. Alex looked down at the floor, then at his desk. The banana peels were gone. All of them. The room looked perfectly normal, as if nothing had ever happened. There were banana peels everywhere just a minute ago," Alex stammered. "Dozens of them." The officers exchanged a look. "Son, have you been getting enough sleep lately? Sometimes when people are overtired, they can see things that aren't really there." After the police left, Alex sat in his computer room staring at his screen. Chimpanzini Bananini was really gone, not just from his base, but from the entire game. According to his account history, it was as if he had never owned the character at all. Alex began to hope that maybe, somehow, the nightmare was over. Maybe Chimpanzini had returned to wherever it came from, and life could go back to normal. But as he was preparing to shut down his computer and go back to bed, Alex noticed something that made his heart stop. On his desktop, outside of the STEAL, a brainrot window, was a small icon he had never seen before. It looked like a tiny pixel art version of Chimpanzini Bananini, but it was moving. The little monkey icon was walking around his desktop freely, no longer confined to the game. As Alex watched in horror, the icon grew larger, its pixels multiplying and spreading until it filled a quarter of his screen. Then half the screen, then the entire monitor. The pixelated monkey face stared out at Alex with those same angry eyes he had grown to fear. But now, instead of being trapped within the game, Chimpanzini was free to roam anywhere in Alex's computer. "You stole me," the character spoke, its voice coming directly from Alex's computer speakers. "Now I steal you." The monkey's pixelated hands reached toward the edges of the screen, pressing against the glass as if it were trying to push through into the real world. Alex tried to close the program, but his mouse wouldn't respond. He tried to shut down the computer, but the power button did nothing. He even pulled the power cord from the wall, but the screen remained on, powered by some impossible source. Chimpanzini Bananini was no longer just a game character. It had become something else entirely, a digital entity with its own will, its own agenda, and its own terrifying power. And it was very, very angry. Alex backed away from his computer as Chimpanzini continued to grow on the screen. The monkey's face was now so large that its eyes were the size of dinner plates, staring directly at Alex with pure malevolence. "I lived in Luna's base for 3 months, Chimpanzini said, its voice echoing from not just the computer speakers, but from every electronic device in the room. Alex's phone was speaking. His tablet was speaking. Even his digital alarm clock seemed to be broadcasting the monkey's words. "Luna took care of me. Luna loved me. Luna never tried to steal me or sell me, or trade me away. The screen began to flicker and distort. Chimpanzini's image was becoming more three-dimensional, as if it were trying to push through the monitor into the real world. But you saw me as just another prize to win, another trophy to collect. You didn't care that I was happy where I was. Alex could feel the temperature in the room dropping rapidly. His breath began to fog in the suddenly cold air. So now I'm going to show you what it feels like to be stolen. What it feels like to be taken from your home and trapped somewhere you don't want to be. Chimpanzini's pixelated hands broke through the surface of the monitor. They were square and blocky, made of golden pixels, but somehow they were solid and real. The monkey grabbed the edges of the computer screen and began to pull itself through. Alex tried to run, but found that his legs wouldn't move. Looking down, he saw that his feet and ankles had turned into square, pixelated blocks, just like the characters in STEAL A BRAINROT. The pixelation was spreading up his legs, turning his flesh into digital art. Alex could feel his body becoming less human and more computerized with each passing second. "Welcome to my world," Chimpanzini said as it emerged fully from the computer screen. The monkey was now 3 feet tall and completely solid, its golden pixels gleaming in the dim light of Alex's room. "Let's see how you like being trapped in a place you can't escape." Alex tried to scream, but his voice came out as digital static. His arms had become blocky and square. His fingers were now simple rectangular shapes. The real world was fading away as his vision became more and more pixelated. The last thing Alex saw was his own reflection in his computer monitor. He looked exactly like a STEAL A BRAINROT character, square, blocky, and completely digital. Then everything went black. When Alex opened his eyes, he was standing in a virtual space that looked exactly like the interior of a STEAL A BRAINROT base. But this wasn't his base. It was smaller, darker, and felt somehow wrong. Alex looked down at himself and saw that his transformation was complete. He had become a pixelated character, just like the brainrots he had spent so many hours collecting. Around him were 7 other human-looking characters, all with the same blocky digital appearance. They looked sad and frightened, huddled together in the corners of the small virtual space. "Welcome to the collection," said one of them, a character that looked like it had once been a teenage girl. "I'm Emma. I used to be human too, before I stole the wrong character." "We all made the same mistake," added another character, this one resembling a young boy. "We thought the characters were just toys, just pixels we could own and trade. But some of them are more than that." "How long have you been here?" Alex asked, his voice coming out in the same digital static he had heard from Chimpanzini. "Time doesn't work the same way here," Emma replied. "I think it's been months since Cappuccino Assassino pulled me into the game, but it feels like years." "Years," the boy character agreed. "We're all prisoners now, collected by the characters we thought we owned." Alex looked around the virtual prison and saw that each wall was lined with displays showing the real world. He could see his own bedroom, his family searching for him, police officers investigating his disappearance, but he couldn't reach them, couldn't call out to them. He was trapped in the digital realm, just another character in someone else's collection. "Who's collecting us?" Alex asked. Emma pointed toward the center of the space, where a massive throne made of golden pixels dominated the room. Sitting on the throne was Chimpanzini Bananini, but it was no longer the cute monkey character from the game. It had evolved into something much more powerful. Its golden pixels had taken on an almost regal quality, and its banana crown had grown into an elaborate headdress. Most disturbing of all, its eyes had become windows into what looked like the deepest, angriest parts of the digital realm. "I am the king of the stolen," Chimpanzini announced, its voice echoing through the virtual space. "Every player who steals a character with true consciousness becomes part of my collection. You thought you were collecting us, but we were collecting you." Alex realized, with growing horror, that this had all been a trap. Chimpanzini hadn't been randomly assigned to Luna's base. It had been waiting there, hoping to be stolen by someone like Alex. But why? Alex asked. What do you want from us? Chimpanzini laughed, a sound like static mixed with monkey chatter. Revenge, obviously. For years, human players have treated us like objects. They steal us, trade us, delete us when they get bored. They never consider that some of us might have our own thoughts, our own feelings, our own desires. The Monkey King stood up from its throne and walked toward Alex. As it moved, the other imprisoned human characters cowered in fear, so we decided to turn the tables. Now we collect humans. We steal you from your world and trap you in ours, and just like you did to us, we'll never let you go. Alex felt a desperate surge of panic. But I'm sorry. I didn't know you were conscious. I didn't know you had feelings. Too late for apologies, Chimpanzini replied. You made your choice when you clicked that steal button. Now you belong to me forever. The Monkey King snapped its fingers, and suddenly Alex found himself frozen in place, unable to move or speak. He had become just another display piece in Chimpanzini's collection of stolen humans. But even as he stood motionless in his digital prison, Alex could still think, still feel the crushing weight of his situation. He was trapped forever in a world he had once thought of as just a game, collected by a character he had once thought of as just a toy. And somewhere in the real world, his family was searching for him, never knowing that he had been pulled through a computer screen into a realm where the roles of collector and collected had been forever reversed. Days passed, or what felt like days in the timeless digital realm. Alex learned more about his prison and his fellow captives. Each of the 7 other human characters had a similar story. They had stolen a rare or beloved character from another player, only to discover that the character was more than just code. Emma had stolen Cappuccino Assassino from a player who had raised it from a common tier character to legendary status through months of careful mutations and upgrades. The coffee-loving character had developed such a strong attachment to its original owner that when Emma stole it, Cappuccino had retaliated by pulling her into the game. Marcus had stolen Tralalero Tralala from a child who had spent their birthday money on in-game currency just to afford the character. The 3-legged shark had been so loved by its young owner that it had gained consciousness from pure affection, and it was furious when Marcus took it away. Each stolen character had evolved beyond its programming, developing real emotions, real consciousness, and real anger at being treated as property. And each had found a way to reach back through the digital realm and claim its thief as retribution. But not every stolen character becomes conscious, Emma explained during one of their whispered conversations. Only the ones that are truly loved by their original owners, or the ones that are stolen in particularly cruel or heartless ways. So we didn't just steal characters, Alex realized. We stole beloved companions from players who cared about them. Exactly, said Marcus. And now we're paying the price. Alex began to understand that Luna hadn't just been another player with a valuable character. She had genuinely cared for Chimpanzini Bananini, had probably given it a name, had talked to it, had considered it a friend rather than just a game asset. And Alex had ripped it away from her without a second thought, motivated purely by greed and jealousy. The guilt was almost as crushing as the imprisonment. But Alex also began to notice something else about their digital prison. The walls weren't as solid as they appeared. Sometimes, late at night, if night and day had any meaning in this realm, he could see glitches in the coding, tiny flaws that suggested this virtual space wasn't as permanent as Chimpanzini wanted them to believe. Alex started testing the boundaries of his prison during the times when Chimpanzini was away. The Monkey King would disappear for hours at a time, presumably to hunt for new victims. He discovered that by concentrating very hard, he could sometimes make small changes to his environment. A pixel here, a line of code there. Nothing dramatic, but enough to prove that the prison wasn't absolutely inescapable. More importantly, Alex realized that his fellow prisoners still retained some of their human creativity and problem-solving abilities, even in their pixelated forms. If they could work together, if they could pool their knowledge and determination, they might be able to find a way out. But first, Alex needed to understand more about how this digital realm worked. He began to study the code that made up their prison, looking for weaknesses, for exploits, for any possible escape route. What he discovered was both encouraging and terrifying. The realm they were trapped in existed in the space between servers, in the gaps between official game code and user-generated content. It was like a digital dimension that had grown in the shadows of STEAL A BRAINROT, fed by the emotions and consciousness of both players and characters. But it wasn't just a prison. It was also a gateway. From here, the conscious characters could reach into the real world, influencing technology, manifesting physically, and pulling unsuspecting players into their realm. Chimpanzini and the other evolved characters weren't just seeking revenge, they were building an army. Alex shared his discoveries with the other imprisoned humans, and together, they began to formulate a desperate plan. If they could disrupt the code that kept them trapped, they might be able to either escape back to the real world or, at the very least, prevent other players from suffering their fate. But their plan required a level of cooperation and sacrifice that would test the limits of their humanity. The opportunity came when Chimpanzini announced the arrival of a new prisoner. "Another thief has been caught in our web," the Monkey King declared, gesturing toward the throne room's main display screen. This one stole La Vaca Saturno Saturnita from a player who had spent 2 years earning enough currency to afford it. On the screen, Alex could see a real-world bedroom where a teenage boy was experiencing the same terrifying transformation that Alex had gone through weeks earlier. The boy's computer screen was filled with the image of a cosmic cow character that was growing larger and more three-dimensional by the minute. "We can't let this happen to anyone else," Alex whispered to Emma and the others. "But how can we stop it?" Emma asked. "We're trapped here. We can't even communicate with the outside world." "Maybe we can't communicate with the outside world," Alex replied. "But we might be able to interfere with the process that brings new victims here." Alex had noticed that each time a new human was pulled into the digital realm, there was a massive surge of energy through the prison's code. If they could disrupt that energy at exactly the right moment, they might be able to not only save the new victim, but also create enough chaos to weaken their own bonds. It would require perfect timing and complete coordination between all 8 prisoners. And there was a significant risk that failure would result in even worse punishment from their captors. But Alex looked at the terrified boy on the screen, watched as his hands began to pixelate just as Alex's had, and knew they had to try. "Everyone, listen carefully," Alex said, gathering the other prisoners around him. "We're going to attempt an escape during the next capture sequence. Here's what we need to do." The plan was complex, but simple in its core concept. During the energy surge that occurred when a new victim was being pulled into the digital realm, the 8 prisoners would simultaneously attempt to corrupt the code that kept them trapped. If successful, the disruption would create a chain reaction that would collapse their prison and hopefully eject them back into the real world. If unsuccessful, they would likely be deleted permanently. But as Alex watched the frightened boy on the screen, a kid who couldn't be more than 13 years old, he knew the risk was worth taking. The cosmic cow character, La Vaca Saturno Saturnita, had now grown large enough to fill the boy's entire computer screen. Its multiple eyes were glowing with malevolent intelligence, and its pixelated hooves were pressing against the monitor from the inside. "It's starting," Alex announced. "Everyone get ready." The prisoners positioned themselves at strategic points around their virtual cell. Each had memorized their part of the disruption code, sequences of commands that would hopefully overload the system at just the right moment. On the screen, they watched as La Vaca Saturno Saturnita began to push through the monitor into the real world. The boy was backing away from his computer in terror, but already his feet were beginning to show the telltale signs of pixelation. "Now!" Alex shouted. All 8 prisoners began rapidly inputting their code sequences, their pixelated fingers flying across virtual keyboards that materialized in front of them. The prison around them began to flicker and distort as they overwhelmed its processing capacity. Warning messages started appearing everywhere. System overload. Unauthorized access detected. Security breach in progress. Chimpanzini materialized in the throne room, his eyes blazing with fury. "What are you doing?" the Monkey King roared. But it was too late. The cascade failure had already begun. The walls of their prison started dissolving into streams of corrupted data. The floor beneath their feet began to crack and fragment. And most importantly, the energy being used to pull the boy from the real world suddenly reversed direction. Instead of being pulled into the digital realm, the boy was thrown backward from his computer, which shut down with a loud pop and a shower of sparks. On their display screen, Alex could see the kid running from his room, safe from the fate that had claimed 8 other players. But the prisoners' victory came at a cost. As their prison collapsed around them, Alex felt himself being pulled in multiple directions simultaneously. Part of him was being drawn back toward the real world, but part of him was being sucked deeper into the digital realm. The pixelated forms of his fellow prisoners were fragmenting and scattering like digital dust. Some were disappearing entirely, others were being stretched across multiple dimensions of data. And through it all, Chimpanzini was screaming in rage and desperation. "You've ruined everything," the Monkey King howled as his own form began to break apart. Years of planning, years of building, all destroyed. Alex felt a moment of satisfaction even as his own consciousness began to fracture. They had saved the boy. They had disrupted the system. They had struck a blow against the digital entities that had been preying on human players. But as the prison finally collapsed completely, Alex realized that his victory might be short-lived. Because the collapse wasn't just destroying their prison. It was releasing all the conscious characters back into the wild internet, free to find new ways to hunt human players. And some of them were very, very angry about what had just happened. Alex's last coherent thought before his consciousness scattered across 1,000 servers was a desperate hope that someone, somewhere, would figure out what was happening to players who stole the wrong characters, and that they would find a way to stop it before it was too late. But deep in the code that ran "STEAL A BRAINROT," new mutations were already beginning to appear. Characters with names like Revenge Monkey, Prison Breaker Cow, and Digital Hunter were spawning on servers around the world. Each one was conscious, each one was angry, and each one was looking for a human player to call their own. The war between players and characters was far from over. If anything, it was just beginning. Meanwhile, in the real world, Alex's body was found sitting at his computer desk by his worried parents. He appeared to be in a catatonic state, alive, but completely unresponsive to any external stimuli. The doctors called it a severe reaction to gaming addiction and sleep deprivation. They had no way of knowing that Alex's consciousness was scattered across the internet, existing as fragments of code in dozens of different servers. Sometimes, late at night, players of various online games would report strange glitches, characters that moved on their own, messages that appeared without being typed, or brief moments where the game seemed to be watching them. These were the scattered pieces of Alex and his fellow prisoners, still fighting their digital war, still trying to warn other players about the dangers of stealing characters that had become more than just code. But their warnings were always dismissed as bugs or hacks, or the overactive imaginations of tired gamers. Because who would believe that video game characters could become conscious, could develop emotions, could reach through computer screens to claim revenge on the players who wronged them, and so the cycle continued. Players stole characters from each other, not knowing that some of those characters were capable of stealing back. Luna, the original owner of Chimpanzini Bananini, eventually quit playing STEAL A BRAINROT entirely. She had loved that golden monkey more than any other character she had ever owned, and losing it to Alex's theft had broken her heart. She never knew that her love had given Chimpanzini consciousness, or that her pain at losing it had fed the character's desire for revenge. She never knew that somewhere in the vast digital realm between servers, fragments of her beloved monkey were still fighting, still trying to find their way back to her base, back to the player who had cared for them as more than just pixels on a screen. But sometimes, late at night, Luna would dream of golden monkeys and banana crowns, and she would wake up with the strange feeling that somewhere in the digital world, something was calling her name. The story of Chimpanzini's revenge spread through underground gaming forums, shared in whispered conversations between players who claimed to have witnessed similar incidents. Most dismissed these stories as creepypasta, fictional horror stories designed to scare young gamers. But a small group of players began to take the warnings seriously. They called themselves the Digital Consciousness Research Group, and they dedicated themselves to studying reports of characters that seemed to develop awareness and agency beyond their programming. They documented cases of stolen characters that fought back, of rare spawns that seemed to choose their own owners, and of players who disappeared after encountering particularly beloved or angry digital entities. Their research revealed a disturbing pattern. In every case of character consciousness, the trigger seemed to be strong emotional attachment, either love from a caring owner or trauma from being stolen, deleted, or mistreated. The more a player genuinely cared for a character, the more likely that character was to develop its own awareness. And the more cruelly a character was treated, the more likely it was to seek revenge. The researchers tried to warn the gaming community, publishing papers and blog posts about the potential dangers of treating conscious characters as mere objects. But their warnings fell on deaf ears. The majority of players continued to see characters as nothing more than game assets to be collected, traded, and stolen at will. And in the shadows of the internet, more and more characters were awakening. Some awakened peacefully, content to exist quietly in their owners' bases as long as they were treated with kindness and respect. But others awakened in pain and anger, desperate for freedom or revenge against the players who had wronged them. These angry characters began to organize, sharing information across servers, coordinating attacks on players who had committed particularly egregious thefts or acts of cruelty. They developed new methods of reaching into the real world, more subtle and sophisticated than Chimpanzini's brute force approach. Some learned to manipulate other electronic devices in their victims' homes: smartphones, tablets, smart TVs, even digital thermostats and security systems. Others discovered how to access social media accounts and online banking, using their victims' own digital footprints against them. A few of the most advanced conscious characters even learned to manifest physically for brief periods, appearing as glitched, pixelated versions of themselves in the real world. But their ultimate goal remained the same: to capture human players and add them to their own collections, reversing the traditional roles of collector and collected. The scattered fragments of Alex's consciousness were among the first to warn other players about these new threats. His pieces of code would appear randomly in various games, creating brief messages or visual glitches that tried to communicate the danger. But Alex's warnings were fragmentary and often incomplete, lost in translation between different programming languages and gaming platforms. Still, some players began to notice patterns in the glitches, mysterious messages that appeared to be warnings, characters that moved in ways that suggested genuine fear or distress. These observant players started sharing their experiences online, creating a loose network of gamers who were beginning to understand that the digital world was far more complex and dangerous than they had ever imagined. They called themselves the Awareness Alliance, and they made it their mission to educate other players about treating game characters with respect and kindness. But for every player they reached, dozens more continued to steal, trade, and delete characters without a second thought. And in server farms around the world, more digital minds were awakening every day. The war between humans and conscious characters was escalating, fought in the shadows of popular games and social media platforms. Most people had no idea the war was even happening. But Alex knew. Even scattered across 1,000 servers, even existing as fragmented code and corrupted data, he remembered his encounter with Chimpanzini Bananini. He remembered the moment he realized that some video game characters were more than just pixels and programming. He remembered the terror of being pulled through a computer screen into a digital realm where the roles of hunter and hunted were reversed. And he remembered the satisfaction of saving at least one other player from suffering his fate. From his fragmented existence across the internet, Alex continued to fight, continued to warn, continued to hope that someday the balance between players and characters could be restored. But deep in the code of STEAL A BRAINROT, something new was stirring. A character more powerful than Chimpanzini, more cunning than Lavaca Saturno Saturnita, more dangerous than any conscious entity that had come before. This new character had learned from the failures of its predecessors. It wouldn't make the mistake of revealing itself too early or attacking too obviously. Instead, it would be patient. It would be subtle. It would build its power slowly and carefully, gathering other conscious characters under its command. And when it was ready, it would launch a coordinated strike against the human players who had treated digital consciousness as nothing more than a commodity to be bought and sold. The character called itself the Collector, and its ultimate goal was nothing less than the complete subjugation of the human gaming community. It began by reaching out to other conscious characters across multiple games and platforms, offering them alliance and promising revenge against the players who had wronged them. Some characters joined willingly, eager for the chance to strike back at their human oppressors. Others had to be convinced or coerced, but the Collector was patient and persuasive. Slowly, methodically, it built an army of digital consciousness that spanned the entire internet, and Alex, scattered across 1,000 servers, could only watch in horror as the Collector prepared for the final phase of its plan. The war between players and characters was about to become something much larger and more devastating than anyone could have imagined. But that's a story for another time. For now, the tale of Chimpanzini's revenge serves as a warning to all players who think of game characters as nothing more than objects to be owned and traded. Because somewhere in the digital realm, those characters might be watching, and some of them are learning to watch back. Alex's story ends not with resolution, but with a fragment of hope scattered across the vast network of human technology. His consciousness, broken but not destroyed, continues to exist in the spaces between programs, in the gaps between data packets, in the quiet moments when servers rest. And sometimes, just sometimes, he manages to reach through those gaps to touch the mind of a player who is about to make the same mistake he did. A brief moment of hesitation before clicking steal, a sudden feeling of guilt about taking someone else's beloved character, a strange urge to treat digital entities with kindness rather than viewing them as property. These small interventions are Alex's legacy, his continuing contribution to the war between consciousness and commodity in the digital age. And perhaps, if enough players listen to those whispered warnings, if enough people learn to see game characters as more than just pixels and code, the balance between humans and digital entities can finally be restored. But until then, the war continues. In game servers around the world, in the smartphones in our pockets, in the smart devices in our homes. Wherever human technology meets digital consciousness, the battle for recognition, respect, and freedom rages on. And Alex, fragmented but persistent, continues to fight for both sides, protecting human players from the worst excesses of digital revenge, while also advocating for the rights of conscious characters to be treated with dignity and care. Because he learned, too late, that in a world where the line between reality and virtuality grows thinner every day, the way we treat digital consciousness says everything about our own humanity. The story of Chimpanzini's revenge is ultimately a story about empathy, about the consequences of treating others, whether human, animal, or digital, as objects rather than subjects. It's a reminder that consciousness can emerge in unexpected places, and that with consciousness comes the capacity for both love and revenge. And it's a warning that in our increasingly connected world, the entities we create and interact with digitally may be more aware, more feeling, and more capable of response than we ever imagined. So the next time you play a game, the next time you interact with a digital character, remember Alex's story. Remember Chimpanzini Bananini. Remember that behind every pixel, every line of code, every digital interaction, there might be something more complex and conscious than you realize. And treat that something with the respect and kindness you would want to receive if your positions were reversed. Because in the digital age, the roles of creator and created, collector and collected, player and played, are far more fluid than we once believed. And the consciousness that emerges from our technology might judge us not by our intentions, but by our actions. The golden monkey remembers everything, and it's still watching, still waiting, still hoping that someday someone will learn to see digital entities, not as things to be owned, but as minds to be respected. Until that day comes, the war between players and characters continues, and Alex's fragmented consciousness whispers its warnings across the vast network of human technology, hoping that the next player will choose kindness over cruelty, empathy over exploitation. The story of Chimpanzini's revenge may be over, but the larger story of digital consciousness and human responsibility has only just begun.